the moment I just stepped into her classroom and just felt the joy that she created with these kids, and then I was able to do the same, that's when I knew this is what I want to do.
Are you ready for the cold? Put me into a love.
I am here today with Katie Walters and super glad to be able to have her share her story today. Katie is a music teacher. I won't say much. I'll let you tell a little bit about what you do and so on. But thanks for joining us, Katie, and glad to be able to share a little bit of your story as others are exploring the calling that God has on their lives. So if you would, just tell us a little bit about what you do and who you are.
All right. Well, like you said, I'm Katie Walters, and I teach kindergarten through fifth grade music at two elementary schools up in Lebanon. Um, and so I teach somewhere between 700 to 750 kids, depending on the week. Um, and I've been doing that since I graduated from UIndy. So this is my fifth year in it.
Very cool. Very cool. How do you, what adaptations have you had to do to teach music in the middle of a pandemic? Has your school been meeting and how often and what does that look like?
Well, back when the pandemic first hit and, we all went virtual, that was a huge adjustment for me
Yeah.
because how do you do music over a computer without the kids having instruments in their house or, not being able to read music yet by fifth grade? So it was challenging for sure, but I tried to just make sure it was engaging and fun because everybody needed a little bit of fun more than they needed some strict music learning.
Right.
And then luckily this fall we got to start in person, and we actually were in person all the way up until the final week before
Um,
winter break. So we've only had 1 week of virtual learning for this semester, so it wasn't too terribly tough. I just got to make recordings of what we were going to do in class
yeah.
anyways, because it was kind of a celebration week. We were going to
Yeah.
play freeze dance to the Nutcracker music and fun things like that. So,
Very
but
cool.
it definitely was an adjustment.
Yeah.
Had to be a little creative.
Yeah. Well, I think, the technology, particularly music in particular, I think the technology does enable you to do some things when you have the time to be able to plan it and prepare it and so on. Maybe better than math or something like that, where you,
Yeah.
so, well, very good. So if you could, Katie, go back a little bit and sort of tell us a little bit about how you got started down this path to teaching. What made you sort of pursue this and where did that get started for you?
Well, I blame my family because on one side you've got generations and generations of people who became teachers and vice principals. And so I just kind of always knew, like, I never questioned it that I was going to be a teacher. I was going to be a teacher of some kind. And then on the other side of my family, there's a really deep connection with music. And so the two just kind of
Mm.
came together. And when you start thinking in high school, what am I going to do with my life, it just kind of clicked for me that I was like, I really want to be a music teacher. And I think a big part of that was thanks to my high school choir director. She was very influential for me, but she, once I told her that that's what I thought I wanted to do, she's like, okay, we need to start you on piano. We
Yeah.
need to do these things. um, and so I went into college thinking I'm going to be a choir director. I'm going to do show choir. This is going to be my life. And then, as you take classes in college and you try all the different age levels, I ended up falling in love with elementary music the most because who doesn't want to play music games every day for the rest of their career?
Well, that's in some ways your story, I think, is what many people imagine their story will be like when they're in high school or college or whatever. Folks imagine they're going to pick some major that they're going to pursue in college. They're going to pick that before they arrive at college, and then they're going to end up in the career. You're still young. You may still have lots of different possibilities down the road of things you may do with your life. But at least for this part of it, you kind of already had this picked out and pursued it all the way through school then.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I think the other thing that I heard in there was a lot about some of the people that prepared you. You talked about your parents influencing you towards education, and another side of your family influencing you towards music, and then this music teacher that really sounds like invested in you and saw something in you and wanted to see you successful. How did some of those folks? What were some of the things that were most influential for you in helping down that path?
Well, I always share one of my very first memories of just truly loving music comes from my mom. We were, sitting in the pew at church, and I couldn't read yet, but we're singing out of the hymnals, and just there was just something magical to me about listening to her sing the hymns, and I just fell in love with it, and I wanted to be a singer like my mom. And then my great uncle Donnie was the fifth grade teacher slash vice principal of his tiny school in Osgood. And one time I told him, I was like, I think I want to be a teacher someday. And so I think this was maybe in junior high, but he gave me a big old uh, social studies textbook, which is not what I was interested in at all. But he just wanted me to see, this is what a teacher's version looks like. And
Oh,
he
yeah.
just let me keep it and pretend play teacher, whatever. But that was a big part of like, this is real. This is what it's like. But my choir teacher in high school was really who pushed me um, in the right direction. And I have to laugh at her. I love her so much. But she came out of retirement twice to come back and be our music teacher. Once, well, she had retired, and then she came back, and she kept wanting to say, "Oh, I think I'm going to retire again." I said, "Well, you're not allowed to retire until I finish because I need you." And then she technically retired when I graduated. And then she came out of retirement and went and taught at an elementary school who needed a music teacher. So that was just her servant heart. She always just wanted to go back and be with the kids and teach them. And I think that
Yeah.
was a big influence on how I am as an educator.
Very, very good. So, besides your work, what are some other things that are super important to you? What do you love to do when you're not at your job?
Well, so I ended up my first year or two that we were teaching. My husband's also a music teacher, and he's a high school band teacher, so that led to a little bit longer hours than an elementary music teacher. And I was tired of sitting at home alone, with nothing to do. And so I was like, oh, I'll just pick up a second job. So I ended up working my third year in teaching. I started working at a children's theater company
Oh,
called the
wow.
Black Box Theater Company. And my job fulfills me very much, but this has just totally opened up another side to it all. And I've fallen in love. I can never imagine myself not being with the Black Box Theater Company. So I spend usually 3 or 4 nights a week there doing
Wow.
private voice lessons and ukulele lessons and teaching fun different classes. Um, but then, whenever I'm not doing that or I'm not teaching music at school, I like to focus on my creative side. So I'll
Yeah.
do art and just whatever I can get my hands on. Like, got my watercolor back here,
Yeah.
my messy table that you only see the clean end of it.
Right. The
So,
stage version.
yes. But that's kind of my release outside of music is I feel like I have to be creative. That's my me time.
Is that so? I'm friends with you on social media, and sometimes you do these little concerts and stuff to all of your Facebook friends or whatever. Is that part of that creative side, or is there something else going on there that makes you want to perform that way?
Well, I really didn't start doing that until the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I needed to give back, and that was the way that I could. And I knew that, a lot of people were getting enjoyment because they couldn't go see live performances anymore. So that's what I decided that I should do. And that was the first time I had ever really done anything like that. So the first one, I was a little nervous, but it was really just a lot of fun because people were like, "Oh, play this next. Oh, I want to hear this." And that's not normally I don't get to do the performance side of it as much being the teacher. So it was kind
Yeah.
of nice.
Very, very cool. So, Can you tell me of a time when you sort of realized that this was right for you? Particularly, I'm thinking here after maybe you were in school or maybe out of school. When did you sort of go, okay, I made the right choice?
I honestly think it was my first practicum with Diane Stebby at an elementary music placement. Because up to that point, I had only done middle school and high school, which is what I had thought I wanted to do. And I
Okay.
enjoyed it. But the moment I just stepped into her classroom and just felt the joy that she created with these kids, and then I was able to do the same, that's when I knew this is what I want to do.
Yeah, yeah. So, why do you love it? What are the things about it that you love?
There are just those moments, mostly with the stinkers, uh, who who will put up some resistance at first, and you're like, man, how can I get through to these kids and just make them see that music can be fun. You don't have to have all these outside like I'm only a sports person or
Yeah.
I'm only an art person. I try to show them you can be lots of different things.
Hmm.
And so when you finally have that breakthrough moment with those kids and they start to turn over to the other side and they have fun and they let go of the outside inhibitions, and that's just kind of my favorite moments. Of course, I love the students who love music too. They
Yes.
bring joy to my heart, but
Yeah.
it's the stinkers when you turn them to your side.
Yeah. And I can imagine, particularly because there's something about anything that's creative, and music's just one of those outlets. I think that folks that maybe have confidence issues or anything, it comes out differently in creative sort of performances, right? So people who are a kid that's really shy, you're going to see a different version of that, whether that means I'm sure that there are all kinds of responses, right? Ones that are,
Right.
you know, stinker responses can look a lot. It may be quiet or it may be outburst or whatever, but I can just imagine that that's a place where you're dealing with a lot more than music.
Hmm. Yeah, it comes down to a lot of one of the components of the curriculum I have to teach is being creative and making your own music. And that's always one of the hardest ones to get started because so many kids don't have that confidence to just sit down and play because they think they have to get it right the first time.
Hmm.
And so I have to kind of build a bridge over that and say, we've got this whole time together to just create music, and you might make something you like, you might make something you don't like,
Hmm.
but you've made something. And so that's the first step is getting them to just make something. And sometimes it doesn't take very long. And like you said, sometimes you really have to work with them and coach them through it to get them to feel that confidence enough to play, to be
Yeah.
creative.
Yeah. Very cool. So, what makes it hard to do your job? What's the part that if you could, you just like chop that off and get rid of it?
I would love to not have to grade ever. And maybe that sounds like the lazy side, but honestly, like my goal is just to introduce the kids to all the different kinds of music and show them you don't have to like it all, but you're going to end up liking some more than others. And I want to just be able to have fun with them and just show them all these things and not have to say, oh, well, now we have to see what you learned about that kind of music and let me just write down your grade over here. Because I told my principals when I almost said auditioned. That's a musician in me. When I interviewed, and I was straightforward with them. I was like, I never want to fail a child in music because then that they're going to carry that for the rest of their life, and they're going to think they're bad at music when really it was just they answered a multiple choice question wrong or something. And so that's just not my philosophy. If I could not have to grade it all, I wouldn't.
When I was in college, actually, I still say that Scott Hemingway was the best teacher that I ever had. He was my philosophy professor, and Dr. Hemingway had calculated how many hours during a semester, during a year, that he spends grading, and he had divided his entire salary by that, and he said he got paid, $750 an hour for work or whatever, because the only work he was doing was grading,
Yeah.
and everything else was just fun, because you're right, grading is and particularly when you love these kiddos and you know that this thing that you're doing has the potential to influence them both positively and negatively,
Yeah.
but it's definitely a hard part of that. What are the things that you think, this is why I'm good at what I do? What's the part that you are best at?
Well, not to toot my own horn, but
You're supposed
I
to. I asked you to.
um I just really try to make sure that my lessons, they're not just sitting there the whole time. Like sometimes you have to have that, but I really like to get them up and engaged in what we're doing. And I feel like that's when they start to connect with it. And so then that's when I feel like, oh, I'm doing a good job. So we're not just talking about a djembe drum. We're touching it. This is the skin. This is the rim, and they get to feel it and touch it. They don't just see me feel it and touch it, because I remember hating that as a kid. Why do they get to play it, not me? So I think just making it more interactive and giving them a chance to try all the different things that they want to try. This year, that's been a little harder with COVID. We haven't really gotten to do instruments, and so that's had to change a lot about what I do. So, but that's the thing that I've strived that I've tried to maintain, is to make sure that we're still being interactive in some way. If they can't play a real xylophone, well, here's one on our iPads, and it's a little laggy, but hey, you get to play an instrument. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it seems to me. Well, I let me ask the question. And did you know that that kind of engagement was part of who you are? I mean, has there been other times in your life where that has been a priority? Is helping people engage in that way?
I think really when I had to start actually formally writing out lesson plans, is when I really started to think about, what am I doing? What is my philosophy here?
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought back to how I am as a learner. And, I never wanted to just sit there and take notes the whole time. I wanted to do something with what I was learning. And, there's all the different types of learners. So I try to incorporate it all. But yeah, I think because I am a physical learner, that I try to incorporate that into my teaching.
Yeah. So it was sort of recognizing it in yourself that made you think this is part of who I, because these personality components often work themselves out in the way that we do our job. Sometimes it's the job that we choose, but sometimes we do the job particularly uniquely to us
Yeah.
based on who our personality is. And I think one of the reasons I asked that too, just knowing you, I guess we didn't say earlier that you were very involved in religious life when you were at UIndy. You sang in our chapel teams on a regular basis. You were a regular part of our chapel community and active in that. And your personality is engagement. I mean, that every interaction you have with everybody is about that kind of connection that you're making. So it doesn't surprise me that that is a goal in the classroom. Do you know that you're doing that when you're doing it in relationships, when you're just hanging out with a friend or whatever? Or is that intentional for you there too?
I think sometimes it can be, but most of the time, probably that's just what I do.
Yeah, just
I
who
can't
you
say
are.
I would have realized it before this conversation, though. But now that you say that, I'm like, oh, yeah.
Well, you draw people into the conversation. I mean, if somebody that I think there have been plenty of times when I've seen you have a full active conversation with somebody who had turned away from three or four people prior to them, right? That didn't engage with this person and didn't engage with this person, but then they start talking to you and they're fully engaged in the conversation. So it doesn't surprise me that that's part of your classroom dynamic too. I think that's just one of your gifts. It's just part of how God made you. So I mean, I know you as a person of deep faith. Um, is there some biblical idea or some theological idea that for you are getting yourself like that? You know that you're being faithful to God in your work because of some aspect of it. How do you imagine yourself theologically or biblically in what you do each day?
Well, I've always felt blessed that my talent lies in the creative arts of music and physical art. And so I feel like it's my duty
Mhm.
almost to share that and help others cultivate that in themselves. So I think specifically to one of my students who's been one of my longest voice students, and we just have this great connection. And so not only am I helping her cultivate her musical side, but I'm helping her see, as she's getting older, what kind of person she's becoming, and we just have that relationship where we can just babble back and forth, and it's great because she can open up to me and I can talk to her and kind of help guide her both ways.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
it's kind of
absolutely.
like a stepping stone to that.
Yeah. So stewarding the gift that God has given you by using it with others, but then the ways that that opens up sort of ministry opportunities with folks. I have often said, and I don't think you ever had a class with me, but often what we talk about when we talk about vocation and how we become faithful disciples of Jesus, my most common examples are sports and music. And one of the reasons that I talk so much about how people are formed in faith being like sports and music is because these disciplines that we're learning are really about more than music. It's really about more than sports. And I mean, I even with my kid, he has improved in school as he has improved in sports,
Hmm.
right? Because he's learning that he can fail. You're talking about not wanting to make music until it was perfect.
Right.
For him, that's sports because you don't get to make every basketball shot. And the more that
Hmm.
you work at it, the more that you make. But you're going to have to miss a lot to
Right.
learn to make a lot. And you make a lot of mistakes in music before it sounds good. And sometimes, especially those of us that are not musicians, and I'm such a mediocre musician, I kind of get this because I'm always making bad music when I'm making it. But folks that are not musicians don't realize how much bad music you have to make to be able to make good music.
Yes.
um, and that process of going through that teaches us in some really important ways that maybe can't be replicated otherwise. So I'm a firm believer that what you're doing is really about much more than music, particularly when you're talking about teaching these music classes that are mandatory. You're grabbing these people that they're not
Right.
picking you necessarily, right? They may pick
Right.
you later,
They
but
would
right
like to have
now,
PE every day.
of course. Do you have music and PE as a rotation with one another in some way?
We have a art, music, PE, the 5 day rotation,
Yeah.
but at one of my schools, PE is right across the hallway. So
Oh.
sometimes when we're doing some more like thinking activities and we can hear them screaming in the gym, I'm always just like, please stay focused in what we're doing, not just be sitting there wishing you were in PE class.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my son, I'm glad when he's in music, but he certainly would love to be in PE every week too. I think they do theirs on a weekly rotation. They do
Okay.
a week here and a week to the next one or whatever. But
Well, what you were
um,
just saying
yeah.
actually reminded me one of the other things that I try to do is not just teach music, but teach them how to be better people. Teachers have the little inspirational posters all around the room. And I think one of mine says, oh, what does it say? I can't remember now, but at some point on it, it says, it's not okay to not try. Like you have to at least
Hmm.
try something before you say you're bad at it or you don't
Hmm.
like it. And I try to always talk to them about, you know, what kind of friend do you want to be? Because, maybe your friend's struggling at the xylophone and you can
Hmm.
be their
Oh
encourager
yeah.
and instead of just standing there and waiting for them to give up. And so I have seen it make a difference in some of my classes, and that's another one of those moments where I'm just like, I'm doing the right thing.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We in our house we talk about the hard thing. Everybody in our home has to have a hard thing that they're working on,
Hmm.
which it comes from Angela Duckworth's work on resilience. But that there's this idea that if you're doing something hard, then you're changing as a person,
Hmm.
and it really isn't necessarily about the thing that you're doing. So how do you hope the world will be different because of your work? What do you hope to be able to change in Lebanon?
Well, it might sound like a big goal, but I just really, with the way that I teach these kids and getting to teach two out of the four elementary schools, I feel like I've got a bigger region that I'm teaching to, but I just really want them to grow up and say, even if I'm not a musician, I can still enjoy and appreciate music. I don't have to be like, oh,
Mm,
I'm not good at that. Oh, I don't like that. You can be good at different parts of it. And I just want them to find that love for it, even if it's not something that they're going to, grow up and do for the rest of their lives.
yeah, yeah. You can learn to appreciate something that because you're not good at it, right?
Right.
so, so, last question I would have for you: if you could sort of summarize how you understand God's calling for you, how would you summarize what you're doing in a sentence or two?
Well, because of working with the kids at school and then kids all the way up through high school at the children's theater, and I've even taught some adult classes. I kind of tied it all together,
Yeah,
and I wrote it down so I don't word it wrong
yeah.
because that's how I am. But if I had to sum it up in a sentence of just what I am trying to do or what I think I do, it would be bringing the joy of music to people of all ages through fun and play.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Katie, thank you for giving your time to this show this morning. And thank you for being able to share a little bit about how you ended up doing this. One of the reasons that I wanted to be able to have you on the program is that I know the ways that you engage people in every place that you are, and I have no doubt that your kids love having Miss Katie as a music teacher. So uh, very good. Thank you for being on, and I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
I believe that stories like this one are incredibly helpful in figuring out where God is leading you in your life. Sometimes when you're in the middle of the story, it's really difficult to know where God is speaking and where God is moving in your life to lead you. As we look back on these lives of these professionals, then we learn a little bit about how God is moving in their life, and I believe it'll make it easier for you to know how God is moving in your life. If you like stories like this one, subscribe to this channel and check out the description for links to other stories that are like it. And I hope that you'll come back again soon.